This video is going to be different screenshots from different videos that I'm going to put in the description. Now, of course, I'm always going to say you really want to assess the situation. You should really only be running if you're at risk of losing your mind, dying for whatever reason, whether it's because of somebody else, yourself, or some neglected health issue. Which also keep in mind that once you run away, that doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get treated for the health issue either necessarily. Although I was lucky enough to find a homeless doctor where I was able to get cavities fixed and stuff, but I mean that's kind of the bare minimum depending on what you actually have going on. And then the other thing was, if you're at risk of being locked up for the rest of your life, or just never getting out in general, which also could lead to losing your mind. So those are the three reasons. Something revolving around you end up losing your life, losing your mind, or you end up getting locked up for the rest of your life for something that didn't happen, or even for self-defense, because that's also a risk too, because youth have no self-defense rights. And honestly, as long as you're defending yourself from a parent, you're never really going to have self-defense rights, but it's going to be worse if you're younger. And not even just under 18, but just younger in general. Also, you want to have the least longest wait till 18. Now, I've always made it clear, even before I left, back on the evidence channels, that most people first become homeless by themselves somewhere from age 7 to 16. And that's in the U.S. In other places, this could be very different. But usually in the U.S., if you're younger and you're homeless, I mean, maybe you're thrown in a dumpster somewhere, or you're hidden homeless, so you're being passed around relatives' houses, and that can make you be homeless from infancy, or if you're in foster care, of course, that is being homeless, regardless of what people try to make it seem like. And you also want to have a plan. Now, unfortunately, it's very rare for somebody to actually have a sibling to go with them, and it's also very rare for the whole partner seeking thing to work out, and I wouldn't even advise that. But if you actually do have a sibling that's actually really willing to go, and it's not like a scapegoating situation where one sibling feels like things are all right or they're good enough, but then you're being treated especially bad, you're actually pretty lucky, because most people don't have that option. Then for the second comment, but the thing about this is that the people who say stuff like this, they're actually weak. And I mentioned this in a couple of videos, especially in more recent times on this channel. So, the reality is, people feel like they're doing what they're quote-unquote supposed to do by quote-unquote forgiving and quote-unquote just acting like nothing ever happened, which isn't even real forgiveness. It's really cognitive dissonance. And what you're really doing is you're leeching off of your abusers and your abusive parents, pretending to have something that you really don't, and pretending that you have a family you really don't, just to say you have a place to stay, just to pretend you have somebody, and just to it's all just being fake and really using people, to be honest. It's codependency. It's unintentional manipulation. You're being no more manipulative than your abusers, and you're manipulating yourself as well. That's actually being weak. Because instead of stepping up to the plate and taking care of yourself, which you're probably already doing anyways, and taking your life in your own hands, you're laying your life down in someone else's hands for them to do whatever they want to you. That's actually being weak. And the whole somebody else has it worse stuff, that's bullcrap too. What I've always said is that it doesn't really matter who has it worse, it's the fact that anybody has it bad at all. And you should never lower, or how do I put it? You should never act like your situation isn't that bad because you feel somebody else has it worse. I remember throughout the years, especially back during the evidence channels, I've had people say that they feel like my situation was worse than theirs. But the thing is, that's probably not true, and either way, it doesn't even matter. Because your situation is your situation, and you still have to live it. And it's the fact that anybody has it bad at all. But I've also heard other people say that saying you can't be sad because somebody else is sadder is like saying you can't be happy because somebody else is happier. And trust me, a lot of the people I knew that were always running around saying other people have it worse, they never ended up getting out. They never ended up escaping. And they're probably, I don't even know, older than me. They're probably 20 something now, and they're still sitting up in their abuse situation because one, they kept saying other people had it worse, but really they were also just too scared to leave. And that's the big thing with people that say stuff like this person in the response. You're just too scared to leave and you don't want to admit that, or you're too brainwashed and filled with cognitive dissonance. But yeah, the wait till 18, that's the real thing to think about. So I personally wouldn't advise leaving before 14 because it's like the wait till 18 is just going to be really, really long. And like, I mean, it's better to leave sooner, but laying low and having to hide from cops, not even because you're necessarily being looked for, but just because, like, especially in places that, like, know a lot about street kids and they know that there's a lot of them, they're always looking for kids that give off quote-unquote homeless energy, which I mentioned that in some other video. And also, let me help you lunatics and other people that'll call the police on you or just make your life worse or put you at risk in some way. Like, people are always telling you about chomos and all of that, which they're everywhere. You can't go to school without being around them. But your real issue is the police and let me help you lunatics. And it's like, having to live laying low and being a quote-unquote fugitive and all that stuff, it's not really easy and it does put a lot of stress on you. I mean, it's better than your previous situation if it was bad enough to leave, but it's still, like, really hard to just be laying low and hiding for so many years. Especially due to the fact that you're going to be getting treated like crap still at times because you're a quote-unquote bum and you're quote-unquote being bad and grown and all that stuff. But plenty of people do leave at 13 or they get kicked out at 13 or even before then. Like, there's people that knew their life needed to change even at 13 and they left and they had to work under the table at farms and do landscaping and they weren't getting paid enough. And I mean, it's not easy, but nothing ever is. This goes into something that I've been saying since early childhood that people would always bash me for. For whatever reason in modern time, people have this weird ageism and brainwashing revolving around what age people should actually get married. And it's kind of funny because it's like, it wasn't even that long ago where people were dropping out of high school at 14, getting married and going to work in factories and then buy homes. But it's like now, parents are trapping their kids in the house for forever until they die because they want another boyfriend or girlfriend once the other one leaves or the other one already left, so they want somebody to still be around them. And then they have their 30-year-old sleeping in bed with them and he's a grown man or a grown woman, just weird stuff. And it's like, it's all mess. It's a whole bunch of mess. Like, people are really out here showering 25-year-olds and 10-year-olds and stuff. And that's really covert sexual abuse, among other things. But I could really keep going revolving around all of that, but I'm not even gonna go there. So, people should know that there was a point in time where you were considered a man or a woman by 13 to 15, somewhere around there. Especially 15 for boys and girls. And people do say that people are having puberty earlier now, and I mean, it makes sense because there's a lot of hormone warfare, but also it seems like people are also having puberty later. It seems like guys, their voice either never gets deeper, like they don't start puberty till like 20, and then for girls they start puberty at 7 and 5 and 8, and that's definitely hormone warfare. And there's a lot I could say about that and the hypersexuality agenda that's been finished a long time ago, really by the 2010s. That adds to the issue. And there's even like some statistics that say having no father causes like earlier puberty but later maturity, something like that. But you may already know, I'm not really into all that having a dad stuff and all those statistics because a lot of that stuff is like manipulative, weird stuff by people that didn't have dads, and it's like, it takes two people to make a kid, so I mean, they had a dad somewhere. Either he wasn't allowed around or whatever happened. But people that did have both parents and still turned out, I don't know, still ended up in messy situations. We know how much this weird just throw a dude in the house stuff is. And actually that causes a lot of issues because, like, one of the telltale factors for abuse in the home is a step-parent. whether it's a dad or a mom, or quote unquote dad or mom. So all that, just throw a dad in there. I already know that that stuff isn't true, but I'm still like just gonna throw that whole puberty statistic thing in there. Don't know if I really quoted it right, but I definitely remember the whole early puberty part. But it's like, it doesn't really make that much sense, so I could say that, unless maybe they mean like earlier sexual activity. But I mean, with the hypersexuality agenda, that's pretty much everybody is falling into that. So I mean, if the parents don't have morals and they're messed up, things are going to go however, regardless of who's there and who's not there, and who's supposedly there, and who's supposedly the dad, and who's not the dad, and who's on Steve Wilkos. But to get back to the point, there was still a lot of ageism always throughout society, but you still weren't like seen as a child at 14 and stuff. It wasn't like that, but you also weren't like thrown out onto the streets at 8 either, or at 18. It wasn't like that either. Or even in your 20s or 30s. Which kind of goes into something that I mention pretty often whenever I talk about age gap relationships. Not only is it bound to have some weird dynamics, but in the end, I really don't think it's a good idea for most people these days, because people aren't raised right. And it's just like a lot of trauma and infantilization and abuse, which goes back to the whole trauma thing. So it's like, age gaps are even worse, because like now people are learning things that they should have learned at 9 in their 50s and 60s. But to try to get back on the point, I've mentioned before many times how dating is prostitution. Dating, especially in like the Western world, and it seems like it's just like a modern thing and it's like spreading, but it's just like getting with somebody because you're desperate and lonely, your parents were horrible, your family system is non-existent or dysfunctional, which is still pretty non-existent. You want a place to stay, you want somebody to buy you something to eat, you're getting with somebody to enroll you in school, or to drive you to school, or to pick you up from school, or to get you lunch, because you don't have a car, or you don't know how to cook, or your parents never taught you how to wipe your butt or take a shower, so you need somebody else to shower you because your mom's been showering you well into your 30s and you don't know how to do jack. Things like that. And due to the trauma, the attachment issues, which I can totally relate to, I'm not going to go into that. Low self-worth, which, something I've been, okay, I'm about to go on a rant. Something that I've been, like, figuring out is that there's definitely a lot of types of low self-esteem. Or maybe I could say brainwashing, because, like, I personally I've never been, like, into the beauty standard thing, which also goes into, like, just different wiring and the fact that I don't really fit any of the stereotypes that people would want to push somebody into for ethnicity, gender, or age. And I never have. And I've never been, like, the beauty standard person, which, like, I've talked about before. When I started to become chronically ill due to iatrogenic effects and I dropped down to 80 pounds and stopped being able to digest food, I didn't know that I was underweight because I had never really paid that much attention, and it's really like hard for me to remember what I look like and stuff. A lot of things with that. So when that happened, I didn't notice until I got multiple comments from people for a long time. Just like how when I had the metabolic syndrome iatrogenic effect / type 2 diabetes, I didn't notice that I was severely overweight either. Or, well, not severely, but I didn't notice that I was overweight, because I never really paid attention to that type of stuff. So I've never been the one for, like, those types of beauty standards, or, well, wait a minute, for that type of, like, I guess, self-esteem type stuff. But I did notice that, like, due to all the brainwashing I went through in the Ramco and the Cash for Kids system stuff and just the different brainwashing they try to put on you, I do, like, have a lot of confusion around certain stuff, because they pretty much try to, like, make you into somebody you're not and make you feel like you're someone you're not. Like, for example, the whole thing where I was supposed to be, like, secretly a millionaire running a cartel, that whole situation, that's one example. Stuff like that. And it definitely warps your sense of self. And I guess that could be considered a type of low self-esteem, and then you, like, have to seek out people for validation about who you are, which that's never going to go well, but I'm not even going to go into that. So that's another reason that people could, like, fall into, like, a lot of desperation stuff. At least I think that's the point I was getting to. Is that what I was still talking about? But anyways, all this stuff leading to long-term age regression and people never, quote-unquote, growing up, which really, a lot of people call childish or somebody acting like a quote-unquote child. It's just like personality disorders and demonization, which of course has it has age regression as a part of it. So people just say, oh, the person's childish because, they were arrested at a certain age, which, I can relate to, but I feel like I'm just developmentally delayed in general. And it's like people have their certain views on what a quote-unquote child is or acts like. But it's really not what a quote-unquote child acts like. It's what a traumatized person who's gotten worse and worse over time acts like. Like if you watch Nova from Software Underbelly, her mom, Tania, you'll see a lot of people say, oh, she acts like a quote-unquote child, talking about the mom. They'll be like, Tania is childish. Or people say this about quote-unquote narcissists or people that are extremely Jezebelic in general. But it's not even that they're childish, they're just really demonized and messed up. But there is some age regression that you can see with them. But quote-unquote children don't act like that. But anyways, due to all that, people are forever chasing relationships and they're not getting married due to that and the whole sleep around, do what thou wilt, sexual liberation culture. And so people, especially in the West, are still quote-unquote dating in their 50s and 60s because they're really not taking accountability, and then they get with one dude, they stab him 3 times, eventually he leaves, or something else happens, or they have him buried somewhere alive, then they get with another dude, or they get with some other whatever in the world, now they're dating their pet, stuff like that. And so not only do people make it seem like younger people shouldn't get married because of these new weird standards and culture, but it's people are really never ending up getting married or getting into relationships because of everyone's pretty messed up. And it's really interesting because it's people don't feel like teenagers should even date each other, but people see nothing wrong with a 13-year-old or 18-year-old dating somebody who's 50 or 30 or something, and they'll be as long as they're consenting. But then when somebody's 16 and 19, or they're both 16, people flip out and they say, oh dang, they're grown and all this weird stupid stuff. And really it's chomoism in the end. Or they're 18 and 17 and people be like, oh my gosh, you're a chomo and you're 18 dating a 17-year-old. And it's everything is, what's right is wrong, what's wrong is right. That's honestly the only way you could put it. What's wrong is right, what's right is wrong. Everything is flipped. And I noticed that the you females and these men people, it's they're always getting with the worst people possible. They usually attract people that are like themselves or just really desperate. They're not open on weekends. And their Wi-Fi's been out since yesterday. And what was I saying? Oh yeah, I remember. Okay, so people will be like, oh, these women, they're hoes and all that, if I can even say that. All those other terms that people use. But it's the dudes that are always saying that, they're pretty much they're just like the women they talk about. But that kind of goes back to something I said in another video. I think the most recent one about corporal punishment in religious organizations and Baal worship. And I mentioned once again how even though society claims to be atheistic, especially in the West, a lot of these narratives that people say all the time, or these, I don't know, doctrines or philosophies, they're flipped around religious standards or religious doctrines. Kind of like how the laws were always being adjusted because they were made to fit men pretty much, and it's people were only supposed to have one wife, but then people started having 5 and things like that started to happen because that's what people were doing. And so then people were just well, whatever, we're just gonna have 5 wives and things like that. And it's the original standard was for people to not essay the kids and for people to not sleep around, and for the boys and girls to be virgins until marriage. But eventually this standard got very flipped around, And it's like now, even though the dudes are also hoes, they're always talking about the women that they get with that are just like them. And it's very interesting. And usually they're really talking about their mom because they had a Jezebelic mom they're mad at. And so now they're Jezebelic themselves. But the point I was really getting at, though, is that, like, what point was I getting at? Oh, yes, like, a lot of blaming and flipping things around. As a side note, I could use Joseph and Asenath as an example. They both are virgins, and they, like, always had people that were trying to get with them, but they would never get with anybody until both of them were married. And Asenath was the Egyptian, I think he was a princess or something, and Joseph was, of course, of the Yasharel tribes. And so, yeah, that's one example. But yeah, this pretty much goes back to something that I've talked about for years, and that's the fact that religion is the NWO. And the whole point of religious organizations was to get people to become atheists, like literally. Flip everything around where everybody hates it and nobody wants to listen to it because everybody's traumatized because the religious organizations are terrorizing people with all their false flipped around doctrines. And it's like, even though society claims to be so atheistic, they're all so religious at the same time with these weird flipped around religious standards. But as I always call it, the cult of society, because really everything is a cult. In fact, I really wanted to make a video about how people that grow up in religious organizations are more likely to become atheists or transgender due to the fact that religion is the NWO, and it's made to get people to hate God and then follow a false one. But to get back to the point, because I forgot what point I was getting at, I was going to say that the hypersexualization of society isn't just like belittling other people and objectifying other people. People also objectify themselves, because when you see other people as sex tokens or whatever you call it, you also see yourself that way as well. In fact, because I need to touch the grass, I remember seeing a comment somewhere a year or so ago, and it went into what I had been talking about a lot. And the dude was like, I used to make jokes about how I was always using and abusing broken women and dating a whole bunch of women until eventually God showed me that I was just as broken as the women I was using. And then I saw this. This was so funny because I've been talking about this issue for months, and then to see that, and I was like, dang, it kind of feels like he's been stalking my page or something, especially because it was like right after that whole age gap dating advice for orphan video. More bullcrap from the whole Kanaya Baker situation, which I have a video about that's like an hour long, where I talk about how insensitive all of it was and how literally everybody's just victim blaming. And the funniest thing about it is that if this girl would have been found alive, she would have been charged and thrown in prison for like years. And then, well, no, she would have been charged, thrown in some mental facility part of the Cash for Kids system, then thrown in jail, then thrown back in the foster care system. That's what would have happened if she was found alive. But since she was found not alive in a house whose house they won't say whose it is, which makes me wonder. Now they're like, oh, well, it's teen violence and the other girls took her out. Honestly, I don't really believe anything these people say. I mention it all the time, how you're only seen as a child in certain circumstances. They commit a crime because they're really messed up in the head, or they supposedly did something, because like I said, I don't really believe anything these people say, but these kids committed this crime supposedly, and so they're not kids or children anymore because they're 11 or they're 10 or they're 7 or they're not a child anymore, they're 18, and so now they should be put in adult prison. But the thing is, the younger you are, the more likely you are to get a life sentence and be put in adult prison and be charged as an adult. So actually, as I always say, youth go to jail for things that aren't even considered crimes for grown people, like fully grown people. So they would be charged as an adult regardless of what they did. Like, an 8-year-old will get 5 years or be at risk of getting charged as an adult for stealing oranges from the store because they're hungry. This is the type of stuff that happens. That's why there's 7-year-olds on the sex offender registry, but yet grown people never end up on there and they don't get charged. Because as I always say, the Triple K, Freemason, Chomo, the Lemite, Aleister Crowley-Loving, lawyers and judges, they hate youth, they hate real men, and they love abusers. Wait a minute. Actually, I think I skipped over some comments because I really want to talk about the whole "I'm scared of kids these days" thing. That's something I really want to talk about. And whenever I have time, I'm definitely going to mention it again, using probably the same screenshots when I make the Children of the Corn prophecy video, which I'm not even going to talk too much about that. But in fact, in one of my recent videos, don't remember which one, I think it was maybe the industry kids, or either it was the one where I talked about the boule and religious organizations and corporal punishment, but I'm pretty sure it was industry kids, because that's the video where I mentioned YNW Melly, Yummy Sanders, and other people. So I talked about how I watched the Yummy Sanders documentary. I watched one of them a long time ago, probably when I was, I don't even know, 7 or something, because that's the type of stuff I like. And it really made me think more about trauma and society back when I watched it, how trauma messes people up, because that's what I've always been interested in. And now I could definitely use that as another example for people having no accountability. People say that specifically after the whole Yummy Sanders situation, Chicago pretty much went downhill from there, and it's been cursed ever since. And the drill thing got really, really bad. But the thing is, what nobody takes accountability for is the child abuse. Yummy Sanders would have never been in the situation he was in the first place for somebody that he supposedly took out that he probably didn't, and the people that they say hit him didn't really do it either, but he still wouldn't have been in the gang scene in general if it wasn't for the fact that he had a horrible family system that tortured him, and he was looking for love in all the wrong places. That's where the no accountability started. The gang stuff, all that stuff comes after it. That more so falls under the whole effeminate thug persona and the brainwashing with the music industry. But people wouldn't even fall into that if they actually had real families and they actually had people that gave real guidance, actually showed them who they are and who they're supposed to be. In fact, something that I talk about pretty often is a lot of the whole "this came from slavery" stuff. Honestly, I feel that's one form of trauma-based mind control, but the trauma-based mind control that's being done with the media has caused a lot of issues for everybody. And also, a lot of people believe that they're descendants of the slave trade when they're really not. And even the Yasharel tribes that never got into the slave trade have a lot of the same issues we have, because I've met plenty of them in person. And some of them are also pretty Jezebelic, and they've never once been in the slave trade, literally. But yeah, I don't know, there's just so much I could say about that. But overall, no accountability started with the whole child abuse thing, and everything goes downhill from there. And the point of me bringing this up is that people say they're scared of the kids these days while jumping around the real issue, and jumping around the real issue of trauma-based mind control, child abuse in general. These kids, these are the Manchurian candidates and the Delta programmed assassins that you created. I would honestly say trauma-based mind control on the individual level has caused more issues than trauma-based mind control with the 1%. And the only reason the 1% are even there is because we gave our power to them, but that's a video of its own. So pretty much, if you're scared of the kids these days, you have to be even more scared of yourself. And that's still jumping around the real issue of whatever their situation was, because of course Kanaya was in foster care. The other 2 kids probably were too as well. That's the only thing I could assume. But of course, the whole situation doesn't make that much sense because they left out so much details. Because it's whose house was she in, and who were the other 2 kids? And then some screenshots back, there was the whole comment about pro-lifers. And I totally get what the person means, and that's why I said in many videos recently that it's the rhetoric that a lot of people are spewing makes sense to a certain extent. Because it's pro-lifers are always talking about not taking out kids, but they still take out kids because they throw them into the cash for kids system for quote-unquote discipline, and that still messes them up, and they end up in prison for the rest of their life, or they still end up dying some other way, or losing their mind and being homeless and called a bum while they're under severe trauma-based mind control, and they're being called schizophrenic because they have alters, or they're being accused of being on drugs, that too. That's part of why I started writing this paper based off of things that I was seeing, especially set on the West Coast in 2023, which I made a video about, titled "When People Love Their Kids to Death Literally." which I could also call extreme helicopter parents, or people are so scared for their kid to like be in the world and go through the traumas of the world. They'd rather for the kid to not be born in the first place, which that actually is also abuse in and of itself, because it's like it's projecting your trauma onto them to where you don't even want them to try to have a life. But I can understand why people fall into that type of mindset. But at the end of the day, it's still Margaret Sanger rhetoric, because she's the one who wanted to take out true Yasharella and melanated people in general and poor people, which is why she made the quote-unquote PP clinics in the first place. And she was like, it's better for a baby to not be alive than to be poor. Pretty much poor people shouldn't be alive, traumatized people shouldn't be alive, people that are at risk of experiencing trauma shouldn't be alive. That's all eugenics still. But yeah, when you commit a crime, or you supposedly commit a crime, or you defend yourself, you're not a child anymore. You're somebody that needs to be in adult prison because you're grown. When you're 19 and you want a boyfriend, you can't because you're a child. If you're 19 and you commit a crime, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. If you're 11 and you commit a crime, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. If you're 7 and you act out your sexual trauma on somebody else, not even understanding what's actually going on, you're in the sex offender registry and you're going to jail for the rest of your life. If you're 7 and you want out of your abuse situation, you're a child and you need to stay at home. And then there's this. I'll put this video in the description. This was another bullcrappy, crazy little stupid little video of age gap relationships. So the girlfriend, or the younger one, was like 17 or 18, and then the older lady was 50. This has mommy issues written all over it. I remember seeing another video that was just like this, but it was worse because they were pretty much like not dressed. And this was another documentary, I think, about age gap relationships, and the boy was like 17 or 18 and the dude was 70. I'm not gonna lie though, the dude wasn't ugly at least, but I mean that's still a sick, demonic situation. Then there's this comment in the middle, and this goes back into the whole thing I talk about all the time, where while chomoism is a big thing, the unfortunate reality is that the Serpent Sea people who actually made these middle labels up, they of course were chomos and masons and the Lemites, as I like to call them, themselves. The whole point of psychiatry wasn't just eugenics and a whole bunch of racial stuff. The overall point was to normalize paraphilias of all types, even people being attracted to older people, which that's the one that people talk about the least because that's the one people want the most. But anyways, the reality is, unfortunately, for the definition of being a pedo, it's sad, but it is being attracted to people who haven't started puberty yet. So really, it'll be being attracted to people who are like younger than 9 for like girls. But the thing about that is that people shouldn't be with people who are too young for them, regardless of how old they are, and that's the reality. But due to these terms, people are always going to be able to like play mind games with it. Honestly, it's really no different than in societies where they don't have these terms, like with in all the stolen land in the Middle East, the quote unquote, or now called Middle East, where people are like they don't have words for bisexual or for pedophilia, so they just call it nothing really, as long as they have a wife, and they're like torturing younger guys. It's not being a pedo or being a bi-pedo because they have a wife. With those, the specific group that always acts like they're anti-alphabet, which is very interesting. Anytime there's a community where they can turn out kids, but then the kids can't be turned out, I'm always going to question them and know that they're full of crap. I mean, obviously. I hope that everybody should be like that, but it's still really stupid. So you can turn out the kids, but then they can't be turned out, so you can unalive them for being turned out. But as long as a dude has a wife, he can essay younger boys and girls because, quote unquote, the younger girl is his wife, but the boy doesn't count because he has a wife. So, yeah. So anyway, the point of that is that you're always hearing about Arabic dudes and like them marrying 9-year-old girls, but they do it to boys too. They just don't talk about it. And I'm not even going to talk about the Serpent Sea Euros because everybody should already know about what they do. But in fact, the Arabic dudes they will actually kidnap the kids from Christian families. So like they'll kidnap a boy if his family is Christian, and they'll essay him and traffic him and stuff. I saw this comment on TikTok. I forgot to mention I very recently made a TikTok for this YouTube channel. I couldn't on the other phones because I couldn't put TikTok on there, and I don't really use it, to be honest. But yeah, I saw this. And of course, when people are escaping these systems, what do people do? They just call the police and they call the facilities and they get the kids sent back to abuse. It's actually no different than like how if a kid tells people that their parents are abusing them, the people will just call the parents, or they'll go to the parents' house and let them know that the kid told them that. It's the same way when people escape the Cash for Kids system. People they'll either let the police in on the system know that the kids escaped trafficking, or they just won't say anything, which honestly that's better. Just like I say when you see homeless kids, don't call the police. It's better for you to just honestly say nothing than to call the police and then send them to jail and into trafficking organizations or back into trafficking. Okay, actually, here's I'm scared of these kids these days screenshots. This is another screenshot from the Patrick T. and Orphan post. The black conservatives are no less Wayland Syndrome house niggers than the black liberals. It's really that way on both sides, just like how there's the overt racist conservatives, and then there's like the covert racist liberals, which honestly I feel like the liberal ones are worse. I've actually been planning on making videos about YouTube channels and different social media personalities like Candace Owens and those two light-skinned dudes. I know that's not a good way to refer to people, but I can't remember their names. It's the something twins. They're like obviously the type of people with mixed kid trauma with the white mom and the quote-unquote white mom and the quote-unquote black dad. But people probably know who I'm talking about. I think they're called the conservative twins, funny enough. I could also go into the religious side, but it's not always religious, of course. So, to try this again, this is a comment that I seen under a video of a black conservative who was, he's obviously the type of dude that had a Jezebelic mom and now he's Jezebelic himself. And because he's mad at all quote-unquote black women or melanated women because his mom was messed up, now he makes these types of videos. And this is something I run into a lot, especially with people with mixed kid trauma or even people that have been adopted by racist quote-unquote white people. It's like even though they commonly end up getting with people of different ethnicities, especially quote-unquote white dudes or women that are covertly racist, but especially for the girls, they get with white dudes that are covert racist, but it's because they have less outward issues some of the time. Although some of them, especially on like the West Coast, it's like you're getting with this dude, but he has you on Fetty, heroin, meth, ketamine. It's like you might as well be single. But anywho, they get with those dudes who are covert racist and always want to call the police on them, or like they're good for years but then eventually something racial happens. But it's like they're less traumatized overall sometimes, but they say the reason that they don't get with quote-unquote black dudes is because they have too many issues because of their moms. And honestly, I could get what they mean for certain people. I'm not one of the all white dudes or all white men or all black women, all black men people, but I get what they mean to a certain extent. This is why people really have to like heal generational trauma, because people are getting with covert racist people to avoid getting into all the trauma issues with people of their own ethnicity. And that's a really big issue, because a lot of people don't see it now, but they're putting themselves at risk with these relationships. And it's like once America goes like full NWO and they go back to their old eugenics ways overtly, being in these relationships with covert racist people is going to end very badly, and it's going to be even more dangerous. I would honestly say the first thing you should do is really ask them about different views they have on different things when it comes to history, religion, or whatever. And I know a lot of people, they just really don't care because they're like so desperate, but like these situations are not safe. I'm not going to lie. Yeah, like I've said before, dudes like this, they end up getting with Jezebelic quote-unquote white women who honestly are no different than their mom, maybe even worse, who have box braids, their trailer park trash. They're the type of women that most quote-unquote white dudes wouldn't want. And They end up terrorizing their kids together. They beat on their kids. The mom shaves their kids' hair off as a punishment. Their kids walk around in the hood with no shoes on and different things like that. And it's like, honestly, the trauma, it's not much different. Because it's like white supremacists, they have the same Jezebel spirits and pretty much the same spirits that are in being a quote-unquote schizonarch, as I like to call it. It's the same thing. So it's like, I don't really see the difference between getting with a YN and getting with a racist or covert racist quote-unquote white dude. And I don't see the difference between getting with a Jezebelic quote-unquote black woman or quote-unquote black dude and getting with these overt or covert racist people. It's not really that much different, and the outcome for the kids is mostly the same, sometimes even kind of worse. Like, I remember this one lady who had mixed kid trauma was Jezebelic herself, although she was definitely lower ranking. She was definitely lower ranking one. She wasn't like too terrible, but she treated me very bad because of her trauma. And like she felt like things would have been better if she was in my shoes, because she feels like having a quote-unquote black mom would have made things better, because, like, I know my ethnicity and stuff, but I'm like, it's very obvious that you've never been around quote-unquote black people. Sure, I know my ethnicity, but that's because I do my own research, and I've always liked doing my own research. Most people in my ethnic group, especially in the U.S., they don't know their ethnicity. Some are waking up. Well, people have been waking up, but, like, you wouldn't have got that from having a quote-unquote black mom, and you definitely wouldn't have got that from having a Jezebelic one. Honestly, your situation would have been kind of the same because you had a Jezebelic mom still, and mine was, and your dad was too, and mine was too. So it's like, I mean, take out the racial side of your mom, like, liking your brother more, because for one, Jezebelic women, they typically like the boys more unless they're the type that really, really hate men. And so her mom liked the son better because of the quote-unquote black men fetish, and she forced him into the NFL. And of course the daughter's been homeless for years. And I'm not even gonna lie, I met a lot of runaways and kicked out mixed kids in, what was that? Is that North Cal? I don't even know if that's North Cali or not. But I think North California and Southern California, that's a big issue there. It's also an issue in the South, but I feel like I met more in like the West Coast. And yeah, there's a lot I could say about that, but yeah, so I can make a video specifically about this, and when I do, I'm also going to throw in the whole foster kids of different ethnicities being adopted by rich quote-unquote white people. That always goes really left. I met a lot in Cali. They're not allowed to talk to people of their own ethnicity, or like, they're taught to pretty much be scared of them. And a lot of them end up homeless and really messed up. Like, there's this one dude, he's Asian, but he went through that, and his family was really, really racist, and they would, like, treat him like a dog, and they would barely let him eat and stuff. And it's really messed up. Like, I remember seeing one, and I mentioned this before, and, like, the lady had 2 Haitian kids, of course, because they love going to Haiti and kidnapping kids. And the boy was wearing fingernail polish, of course, and he was also, like, buying stuffed animals. And it's like, no boy that age is going to be buying stuffed animals unless something happened to them. Like, really. And, of course, they're, like, taught to be scared of me. And that's something I ran into a lot with, like, especially, like, the younger ones. Like, the toxic lady I mentioned, she actually was willing to talk to me. But, like, the younger ones, they're always, like, scared of me. And they act like I'm going to, like, drag them into, like, I don't know, becoming a Crip or something. But it's a really unfortunate situation. In fact, when I was in Oregon very recently, like, I literally just came where I'm at now, I met this one girl. She had just been kicked out a few days before I met her, literally. And she was mixed, and it's just a messed up situation overall. But yeah, the situation is horrible. And going back to that first mixed lady I mentioned, the older one who's maybe like probably about to turn 27 now, but she was, I don't even know how old she was when I met her, like 24. It's a really, I don't even know how to put it. Pretty much her parents were karate masters. And that was absolutely horrible, and it sounds very horrible and terrifying. But lastly, to throw onto that in the black conservative thing, because I completely forgot to talk about the screenshot, The dude was talking about or reacting to videos of quote-unquote black women talking about black and white fatigue or something like that. Now, of course, I have no idea what that means. It does sound pretty funny. But this comment that he liked says a lot about his agenda. And to be truthfully honest, a lot of these people, they're just industry plant puppets that have been specifically put in these positions to make these race-baiting videos. And of course, there's a lot of quote-unquote black and quote-unquote white people in the U.S. making videos like that. I also noticed that there's a lot of African creators that have jumped into the bandwagon of that. Although their videos are more truthful, I could say. But a lot of the ones in the U.S. that are making videos like that, it's just a lot of stuff to bait people and make people mad and hate each other. Like Candace Owens, for an example. For one, that's a dude. Two, I didn't even believe that it was a real person. I thought that they were AI. But Candace Owens is a dude, and I still believe that they're AI as well. I don't believe they really exist. But one, they're under trauma-based mind control. They're married into the Serpent Seed bloodline. They're an industry plant. They're a puppet put in place to do all this race baiting stuff. And you notice the people that like Candace Owens the most, people in the Christian hijacking. Then dudes like this who are mad at their Jezebelic moms. And lastly, quote-unquote white women and white men. Or really not even them, just white supremacists in general. They like it, but not all of them do, but the more racist ones like her. Now you notice people like Candace Owens, you can't ever figure out who their parents are because they don't really exist or they're made in a lab or something. You just happen to go to Harvard and then marry into the Serpent Seed bloodline. Yeah. And oh my gosh, I forgot about what this comment section actually said. So the dude liked this comment as if, he has to be a troll. There's no way he's not under trauma-based mind control or mad at his mom or his family in general. And that's another thing, especially in the Christian community. These Williams Syndrome house niggers that flip history and go along with all the fake history stuff because they're mad at their mom and they're mad at their family in general. That's annoying too. But how could you like a bullcrap comment like that? As if any of the ethnic groups that you're told founded any of those things actually did. Really, all that stuff is bullcrap. They didn't make any of those things. And it's really weird though because it's the thing is, it goes back to how the Catholic Church started time over. They're acting like things that were founded thousands of years ago, before any of these other ethnic groups even existed, were founded by them in the 16th and 19th century in the early 2000s, which is so weird. It's they had sewer systems back in ancient times, but it's now they're trying to act like it was just founded 3 years ago or something. And then the other things they name is fallen angel technology anyways. And I noticed that the lower level Caucasians are always taking credit for what the Serpent Seed at the top made. The real white supremacists at the top do not like anybody. And this is something that a lot of people really need to understand. Because this is why all the baiting keeps happening. All these fake racial shootings on the news, and then the quote-unquote white people can say, oh, well, he deserved it, and the quote-unquote black people say, well, he didn't deserve it, and our lives matter, and then the white people say, blah, 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 blah. It's a whole bunch of stupid stuff on both ends. That's why I always say, I can actually relate to people with mixed kid trauma because I see the bullcrap on both ends. And honestly, I see no accountability on both ends, and it's all kind of the same, which makes sense because we're all brothers anyways. Or genetic brothers, genetic children, but genetic brothers at the same time. And that's where all the similarities come in, but it's all so annoying because it's the real, actual white supremacists at the top who actually fund and start all this stuff, the Serpent Seed at the top, they just have a field day laughing at both of us. And it's so funny because it's look at this, Jesus or Caesar Borgia for better words. And then they name all their little Serpent Seed friends in the Hellfire Club pedophile ring, which is Benjamin Franklin and all these other people that were named. And you notice that the PFP looks like some melanated lady, because they love to do that too. And honestly, a lot of the times these comment sections, when they're not just bots, they are the Serpent Seed themselves, but it's also some Southern people as well. I can't lie. But the funny thing is, it's the lower level Caucasians will take accountability for this fallen angel technology that these people brought out. But then some of them will say, oh, well, actually, they're not even really quote unquote white, they really just hijacked the white race. And a lot of people push that narrative as well. And really the only reason that some of them do that is because they're mad that the serpent seed got all the wealth and they didn't share it like they promised they would. But it's like, you say that they hijacked the white race, but then you take accountability for everything that they do. Like Benjamin Franklin, Elon, Einstein, Christopher Columbus, all those people were serpent seed. And it's like, you say they hijacked the white race, but any other time you take accountability for their history. And yeah. Then at the end of the day, if like people weren't always applauding them and covering up for them, the Christian church gives them millions of dollars every year. If people weren't always doing all those things, then like they wouldn't even be able to frame people for the things that they do. And also people like, they go along with it. Kind of like what Pastor Stephen Darby said once. The way that these people play these racial games with people back and forth and cause all this division is because the quote-unquote white people, the quote-unquote black people won't take accountability, and the quote-unquote white people won't either. And the white people won't say, well, these are our quote-unquote black brothers and sisters you're killing, especially the ones in the church. Of course they're not going to do that, but they won't do that. They just say, oh, well, it didn't happen or he deserved it. And then the black people do what they do, and they flip out and all that. They fall into the programming too. Because, like, all people really have to do is, if people just would admit what's going on, then none of it would be able to happen. But, especially, like, with the Christians, I notice with the truther channels especially, they will not admit that racism is actually real. They just say that it's just an agenda and that it's not real and all that. They won't admit that the fake history is fake. And this is why the serpent seed are able to keep pushing all these agendas that they push and cause all this division, because the Christians especially are in the cult that they're in. They won't admit jack, and they just push everything along and just ride it out. And this is why the same bullcrap keeps coming back up when really all of this stuff is a game anyways. And truther channels, the Christian ones, they're good for this. They're good for all this racial stuff that they promote. And it's like they're either supporting the Europeans running around Africa pretending to be the people. Christians either push replacement theory or both. But also, since like the Caucasians believe they are the people, sometimes they don't even feel like it's replacement theory. They feel like it's just them. Which is funny because the real white supremacists at the top don't claim most of these people. And lastly, a situation with the girl who ran away in Utah and was obviously into a lot of things that revolve around SA. So when I first saw the pictures, I could already tell this is definitely a rich girl who's probably a rich girl who's in an abusive family. She's also probably like has parents that are like the ones that have been exploited throughout the years. It gave like pageant girl vibes. All their abuse was broadcasted on TV, which is a very common thing these days. Like JOJo Siwa, Honey Boo Boo. Different shows like that are really, actually those are the main ones I can really think of when it comes to like dancing and pageants. Cause like DD4L, I mean, it was kind of toxic, but it wasn't like the crap you saw in Dance Moms. I think that's what it was called. Was it Dance Moms? Which is funny because the moms weren't the ones dancing. Then this goes back into something else that I was just mentioning. People are, of course, saying, quote-unquote, she's a child and she's being bad and she's being grown. It's very obvious that she's already been essayed. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she's in, like, some Russian sleeper cell family. She's going through MK Ultra. So this person said, point of my comment is you people keep calling her a child. A 5-year-old is a child. An 8-year-old is a child. This girl is 15, almost 16. She's a young lady. I only see one scenario where a 16-year-old is begging people to kidnap her. She has parents who are out of control with trying to control her. And honestly, I wouldn't even necessarily just say that. Usually it's a lot of extreme neglect and the kid has already been essayed. Especially in situations like this where she's saying the things that she's saying and letting people say the things that they were saying to her. She has parents who, I think I already read that. And she feels her only choice is to leave. Check the parents. Of course, that's never going to happen. I don't really know how people say stuff like that. There is no system put in place to help anybody with anything. There is no system put in place to save abused kids. There is no police officer falling out of the sky like Incredible Hulk, or at least the old Incredible Hulk. Because the old Incredible Hulk goes into this whole thing that I pieced together and had mentioned before, that child abuse is also pushed to get people to want to become transhuman. Because if you're more than human and you have superpowers, then nobody can hurt you anymore. Like, I'm trying to say this without laughing. Hulk had an abusive alcoholic dad that would beat on him, and so he wanted to save other kids who were getting beat on by their alcoholic dads. So what did he do? He became a scientist and he mutated himself. Not to mention in trauma-based mind control, they do experiments on you and they do things to you to get your powers to come out. This is done especially in like SPED and other cash for kids system branches, and especially the higher level of SPED like GATE. But anywho. Now, of course, I like the comment, I get the point of it, but it is very obvious that she had more going on than wanting a boyfriend. But yeah, she's a pretty girl. Why doesn't she have a boyfriend her age? I bet it's the parents. Parents are horrible at realizing when it's time to loosen the rope because they love the power and being able to control someone. Should their daughter be able to talk to older men? No. But I would argue that I bet she tried having a boyfriend her age and they said no. Now, I would say it's very obvious even from the pictures of her that she's been at state already and has been through a lot of stuff. And people are even saying the pictures are eerie. But people commonly take this like the wrong way for whatever reason. But you can tell when somebody's been through some mess by looking in their eyes. And it looks like she's been through some deep sexual stuff. And I've seen that look in a couple of people's eyes throughout my life. But overall, I would say she's probably in a Russian sleeper cell family and is going through trauma-based mind control. And I know people are going to be mad, but I mean, I already know that Russia and China is going to conquer the U.S. as well as other places. And I mean, that's the U.S.'s judgment. But still, Russians are mean, and I know the different stuff that goes on. Like I've even said, the only dudes that ever remind me of my dad are always extremely traumatized Russian and Romanian people that have been through extreme trauma-based mind control in orphanages and different trafficking organizations. And, of course, anti-humanism, pro-transhumanism, animal-loving bullcrap. So this is a comment from a video that was about a school doing a check for truancy or something like that. The police went to the house because neighbors also said they heard like an autistic kid or a kid screaming and banging on the window and stuff. And, of course, the police officer was like, oh, well, I know autistic people just do that. And the police officer went in the house and, like, the kid was in, like, a makeshift cage. And they also didn't have on clothes for whatever reason. Don't know if they took the clothes off or something, or if the parents did. But I will say, though, that with the looks of the situation, the kid is still better off at home. And the police officer was, of course, saying, well, I know that, like, it's hard for them to deal with the kid and pretty much setting the kid up to be sent to some facility where they're going to be getting drugged, tied to a bed, and tortured. They're better off staying at home. But overall, the comment was, of course, pushing the usual bullcrap that animals matter more than people, or that animals are equal to people, which people aren't even really doing that. They're really saying the animals are more valuable than people, which is what I call anti-humanism, pro-transhumanism. I can honestly make a whole video about that police clip, because it's very obvious that, as usual, the police officer is siding with the abusers and the kid is about to get sent somewhere worse, and they might as well just stay at home. Like, even if CPS did take them in, they're either going to get sent back or worse, they'll be kept in CPS custody, but they're not going to go into a foster home. They're going to go straight into some prison somewhere, which a foster home will still be the same or worse. In fact, I forgot all about this, but I've been trying to get an update on that girl who was getting sex trafficked by CPS, and where also this whole situation went down, where her foster parents killed one of the babies and then tried to blame her some months later, and then tried to put her in jail. But she's disappeared again. But, like I said, she should have ran away years ago, and that's what happens when you're too scared and you say other people have it worse. This is way too long, though, so I'm going to have to try to wrap this up. And people are saying this is why my kid isn't having a smartphone. Honestly, I don't really feel like phones are good with how people's quote-unquote parenting is. It just sets a kid who's neglected and being abused and has stayed up for sexual addiction of all types and going into worse stuff. And that's like the real issue. Cause like you're never gonna meet somebody who's really doing this stuff that isn't already in a screwed up situation and isn't going through what they're going through on the phone at home already. This goes back into what I mentioned in the video, or at least I think I mentioned in this video, the one about how the kid victims get charged with CP and put on the sex offender registry. And also I have another video that's about something similar, and I think that's where I mentioned the issue of people's essay imagery going viral and then people at the school finding out. And this is very common, and then like the school and the teachers threaten the kid and physically attack them to bully them about the situation. Like, school is a horrible place if you're in a bad situation. Oh yeah, then that dude made that comment about 18-year-olds. Those are just more traumatized people. But lastly, a comment somewhere said that after this girl's information and business being put all over the internet, she's going to need even more therapy. Honestly, I feel like whatever situation she's already in is probably going to be even worse than that if she gets caught and sent back, which is very risky. It may happen because her parents are rich, so of course they got a private investigator, which is very dangerous when you're trying to escape abuse situations. And as I always say, true crime channels are exploitation, and they exploit abuse victims. And I forgot to mention, this also goes back to the whole rich kids don't get abused lie, which I made a video about, which I also re-uploaded from 2021 or 2022, something like that. And it's also in the description of the videos about Greg Heffley / Diary of a Wimpy Kid, if I don't remember to put it here. I also have videos by Daniel Mackler in the description which talk about the abuse that rich kids go through. And one even mentions how they eventually get the sociopath label sometimes. But I say all this because someone even mentioned that the girl only had bruises because, quote unquote, she plays sports. It was actually really interesting to me, and I think the screenshot's in here. Well, no, it definitely is. Somebody mentioned all the different activities she was involved in, like skiing and things like that. And I knew it because I could tell by looking at her. Not like, I know this is going to sound like stereotypical, but I don't mean it like that. Like, I could tell she was one of the rich kids that were being abused, and she gave pageant girl vibes, as well as many others.